Welcome back to the Unsolved Mystery Channel's exclusive series, JonBenet's Web Truths. This episode is going to be an extensive one, so I will display my fair use disclaimer and content disclaimer stating that I do not claim copyright on any of the content utilized in this episode. And if there are any issues, to please contact me first. With that said, on tonight's episode, we find ourselves back with our infamous JonBenet Suspect-Conspiracist and all-around wackadoo Melinda Kula, which I hope to have been able to have moved past by now, but unfortunately, just recently, she made yet another public appearance spreading misinformation. This time on the True Murder Podcast's YouTube channel, where she continues to slander and defame her favorite innocent target, William Rohn, aka Melinda's Bill Ramsey or Secret Santa. But getting right into debunking her lies...
Let's go to 1996, take us back for people to understand what JonBenet had told four persons. Tell us what JonBenet had said regarding Secret Santa. Tell us about these conversations before we talk about who you found out to be the Secret Santa.
Children are never hurt. Everyone wants them to go away. But JonBenet told a friend of hers, and that information was just made available very recently. This friend announced that JonBenet, when they were young, told her she was very excited. Santa's coming again after Christmas. But the child said, well, Santa was here. She said, no, Santa's coming again after Christmas with a present, but it's a secret. It's a secret visit. This child just now, recently, within the last couple of weeks, came forward with that information because now she's 26 years older and she realized the importance of what JonBenet told her dear friend when they were both 6 years old.
Okay, so we're only 3 minutes into this podcast, and Melinda's first statement is a total fabrication. And to prove such, we will turn to one of my favorite JonBenet websites, acandyrose.com, and a page under the Flight 755 15th Street passengers in the Vortex section, dedicated to the Ramsey neighbor and family friend Barbara Kostanek, which directs us to a segment of the 1999 Lawrence Schiller book Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, where Barbara Kostanek herself had written a statement describing how her and her daughter Megan had met the Ramseys and became friends. In the last section of her remarks, she states, "The day before Christmas, JonBenet was at our house playing with Megan. The kids were talking about Santa, getting all excited. I asked JonBenet if she had visited Santa Claus yet. She said, oh, Santa was at our Christmas party the other night. Megan had seen Santa at the Pearl Street Mall, so we talked about that. Then JonBenet said, Santa Claus promised that he would make a secret visit after Christmas. I thought she was confused. Christmas is tonight, I told her, and Santa will be coming tonight. No, JonBenet insisted. He said this would be after Christmas, and it's a secret. Now, whether this account is true, it was published in the 1999 book Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, and the Candy Rose website also directs us to a segment of the 2000 Ramsey book Death of Innocence, where they reiterate the same story, but they add, after the murder occurred, Barbara Kostanek called the police trying to get them to listen to her story about what JonBenet had said. The police wouldn't pay any attention to Barbara. Apparently they were already focused on their theory that the parents did it. They continue, as a trained engineer and highly educated person, Barbara knew that the comment JonBenet had made to her was possibly of critical importance. She finally called Susan Stein, who is a well-known friend of the Ramseys and has been referred to as their pit bull, as she was very protective of the family. But they write, she finally called Susan Stein, expressing her frustrations with the lack of response from the police. Susan, in turn, called our investigators, who encouraged the police to take a second, more careful look, which I doubt they did. But the Ramseys conclude, while we were interested in this type of information, we did not want to do a bolder police and rush to erroneous conclusions. And this was released well over 20 years ago. So much for Melinda's claim that this just recently came out. But getting back to Melinda's latest public appearance.
You cite three other people that were also told about this Secret Santa. What kinds of things specifically did JonBenet say, and to who?
The Santa at Fleet White's party, that Santa was accustomed to being there for the Fleet White family, so everyone was familiar with that Santa. That was the second Santa for JonBenet. JonBenet's family's Santa, Mick Reynolds, was Santa number 1. So as this party is winding down at Fleet White's house and Priscilla's, JonBenet is thanking Santa, and Santa is hoping she enjoyed all her presents. JonBenet told that Santa, Santa number 2, she's expecting another Santa after Christmas, but it was a secret Santa, and he's going to bring her yet another present. Santa number 2, I'm not sure if he became a little annoyed that she might be greedy or didn't understand she was speaking her truth. Santa's coming again after Christmas because that Santa told her, he has already been here at your home and here I am. So he wondered why she was expecting another Santa.
Which is a fascinating story, except this also is a total lie, as there was no Santa at the White's Christmas party on the 25th. So she is 2 for 2 on telling lies thus far, but let's see what else she claims.
In the evening when everyone was leaving, I believe that JonBenet told Priscilla White, Santa's coming again after Christmas.
Well, this may not come as much of a surprise, but what Melinda believes is just not true, as there is absolutely no evidence of JonBenet telling Priscilla any such thing. So we are 3 for 3 now, but let's keep going.
When Papa, John Ramsey, tucked his child in bed, somewhere along the line over these past 26 years, someone pointed out that she also told her father while he's tucking her in, and she wakes up just a moment or two, and she's excited because even though she's sleepy and it's been a long day, Santa is coming again after Christmas.
Wow, this woman is incredible, because somewhere along the line, someone pointed this out to her, and she believes it to be the gospel truth. Now, while I can't tell who the someone is that may have pointed this out to her, I know the somewhere they likely got this from, because...
Next, a 1-hour movie event. The tragic story behind America's most notorious unsolved crime. Getting away with murder. The JonBenet Ramsey story begins right now.
The following program deals with a controversial subject. The theories expressed are not the only possible interpretation. The viewer is invited to make a judgment based on all available information. Although based on a true story, some individuals and events portrayed have been composited and or fictionalized for dramatic purposes.
So, did you have a good Christmas?
Santa's coming back to see me.
No, honey, Santa's already been here. He only comes once a year.
No, it will be a special visit. That's what Santa said.
Oh, okay. Well, good night.
And I do believe that would fall under the fictionalized for dramatic purposes category of this film, because from reading the police transcript of both Patsy and John, neither of them were aware of any supposed secret Santa visit until after Barbara Kostanek reported it to Susan Stein and their investigators. But getting directly back into our recent Melinda Continues Her Lies podcast, she then states,
The child, who's now 26 years older, that is recent. That is a young lady who knows what she heard from this precious 6-year-old friend of hers.
Which I guess if you consider the 1999 release of Perfect Murder, Perfect Town and the 2000 release of Death of Innocence to be recent, then sure, that's true. But she continues,
The other Santa, I don't know that he's still alive from the Fleet White party.
I can assure you, Melinda, he is not alive because he never existed.
And for Priscilla, she may remember that.
Well, I'm going to highly doubt that, because that never actually happened. Although if you can prove me wrong on this, well, that would be a miracle because you made this up.
But certainly I would think a father would remember the words that his daughter has to say about a secret Santa after Christmas.
I too would certainly think a father would remember something like that also. Except that didn't happen in real life. That came from a fictionalized Fox TV movie. Now Melinda, I'm not sure if you realize this, but not everything you see on TV is real. Particularly these days with all the fake news media. But getting back to Melinda Kula's latest slander and misinformation campaign podcast appearance, where she once again brings up a topic I've already debunked nearly 8 months ago in my video with a thumbnail taking issue with the claims of the armchair detective and JonBenet Conspiracist Melinda Kula. and this is regarding JonBenét's encounter with the family's gardener, Brian Scott. If you have already seen that segment, you may want to skip forward in this video to the next segment. But since I find this to be one of her most egregious claims and she is still rolling with it, here we go.
You read about the groundskeeper and what JonBenet had said to the groundskeeper regarding Secret Santa.
Yes, her conversation with the groundskeeper stemmed from her coming to him and she was crying. And this I had read somewhere. She approached him, she was crying. He wanted to know why she was crying. After all, it's Christmas. You've opened your presents, you've visited with Santa, you have a brand new bike. Why would you be crying on Christmas? Probably he's thinking as a young man himself, did someone hurt her? Did she fall? What's wrong? And she said to him, I wish my father was around more often. So at that moment, I'm feeling as if she's not seeing her father as the bad guy. I wish my father was around more often.
Now, there is a grain of truth to this story, but 90% of what she just said is total BS, as we will learn from this romper.com webpage. With an article titled, What is Brian Scott Doing Now? The Ramsey Family Gardener is Speaking Up, written September 18, 2016, by Akenza Moeller, in which they state, Scott also brought up JonBenet Ramsey, JonBenét's father, when speaking to Schiller, the author of the book Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, relaying a story in which JonBenet cried over her father's absence. The article continues, According to Scott, JonBenet said John, her father, would disappear for long periods of time, that she didn't know where he went, and that she missed him. Which a lot of kids feel that way. But they continue, Scott told Schiller, I don't know what to say, didn't know enough about the situation, didn't want to intrude or play counselor, it wasn't my place. I changed the subject and started to rake up leaves. So there was a semi-awkward story of JonBenet crying to the gardener that she missed her daddy. But he was the CEO of a billion-dollar business, and no major red flags go up for me hearing this part of the tale. But this is where I take issue with Melinda's retelling of the story. As this states, Scott relayed a story in which he and JonBenet played with raked leaves, which is about a rather sweet encounter between JonBenet and the gardener. But they continue. That was probably the last time I spoke to JonBenet, Scott told Schiller. 6 weeks later, I took the morning paper from my front steps and I saw it. I don't even remember now what the headline said. So much for Melinda's claims of all this going down on Christmas Day. Why does she lie about things like this? Is she just trying to sensationalize her story? Which I have to assume she is. But that is only a part of her fictitious telling of this tale as she continues.
She said to him, I wish my father was around more often. So at that moment, I'm feeling as if she's not seeing her father as the bad guy. I wish my father was around more often. And why does love hurt? Why does love hurt? That was the second comment. Why would a 6-year-old even make such a statement?
Why does love hurt? The real question for Melinda is, why do lies hurt? And this one really should put Melinda Kula's credibility in the red, because as you will see from the opening pages of the book Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, they took a beautiful story of encounters between JonBenet and the gardener that actually bring me to tears in how sweet and innocent JonBenet was, and they transformed it into some sick, twisted tale that they can try to correlate to JonBenet having experienced prior abuse. Absolutely disgusting. Because the actual question that JonBenet asked was, do roses know their thorns can hurt? Which does rhyme with, why does love hurt? And I would say there's pretty big difference in the two questions. But I guess the truth was not good enough for Melinda's fanciful tales. Plus, how could she claim prior annual abuse of JonBenet by her non-existent brother, Bill Ramsey, without stoking the false claims of prior abuse with this doozy of a lie? Why does love hurt? Such BS. But enough about Melinda and her crap, and let's hear the true, sweet, sincere story that author Lawrence Schiller actually wrote, starting with, do roses know their thorns can hurt? JonBenet asked me that one morning. Scott recalls, I was the landscaper at the Ramseys' home during the last 2 years of her life, and it was the kind of question I had learned to expect from her. I remember how intelligent JonBenet was. That's why I never talked to her as if she were just a little kid. I spoke to her pretty much as I would an adult, the way I'm talking to you now. We would discuss evolution, the natural mutations that occur in plants, animals, even people. So when she asked me about thorns, I told her, they're a rose's shield. They allow roses to survive. they keep away animals who might eat them, which I think was a beautifully sweet story of an encounter between JonBenet and her friend. But I am sure Melinda has an ulterior motive for manipulating these facts. So let's get back to the podcast where she raises the question asking,
why would a 6-year-old even make such a statement? Is it because the secret Santa who visited every Christmas Eve hurt her while he's in costume? Is that a possibility? The answer is yes.
Now, to find out why Melinda thinks this is a possibility, we will go back to another appearance she made earlier this year where she states,
Because it was determined by 3 different men who examined this corpse that there was, and this is very important, there was damage, old scarring is what they called it, old scarring. So if I cut my wrist 10 years ago, and then I cut it 5 years ago, and then I cut it a year ago, the scarring is different. These experts know this was from 10 years ago, this is 5 years ago, this is a year ago, it's fresher by the way it heals. So they determined that there was old scarring in her vaginal wall over a period of time. And I am telling you now, and I am going on record right now, to say that every time he went there, Bill Ramsey, to collect his annual inheritance, nobody knew that that is not all. That's right? That is not all he collected because of old scarring that could be separated year by year by year. And the reason why I have to say this, and I'm going to stand behind it, is because JonBenet was crying Christmas morning.
which as I have proven is not true. But this is where she tells these hoodwinked hosts the same BS story. Now, getting to the debunking of this claim of prior SA, I would say we should get to the heart of the situation. However, with Melinda, I do not believe that applies.
I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small.
As she neglects to explain the findings of this 1998 Michael Tracy and David Mills production titled JonBenet's America, which if you have not seen it is absolutely incredible and can be found on Vimeo.com or following the link of the community page of the Ramsey Case YouTube channel. But as they state in this wonderful documentary,
other media stories have suggested vaginal inflammation revealed in the autopsy report suggests previous sexual abuse. This conclusion is not supported by the balance of medical opinion.
From what is noted in the autopsy report, there is no evidence of injury to the anus. There's no evidence of injury to the skin around the vagina, the labia. There's no other indication of any healed scars in any of those areas. There's no other indication from the autopsy report at all that there's any other previous injuries that have healed in that area.
Now, hearing from this medical examiner / doctor, and having read the autopsy report findings myself, I'm going to go with what he says on this and not the pathological liar Melinda Kula, whom we will catch back up with now on the podcast for her final false tale. And this one is a rather complex and multi-layered theory of misinformation, which she has told quite a few times, so I am going to utilize a number of her previous appearances over the last few years. But getting right into it,
Let's get back to what the neighbor heard later after this. Again, we're not going to go into what happened on that morning, the police arrival, and the mishandling of this case, the gross mishandling of this case right from the very beginning of the investigation. But let's talk about what police do find in terms of a neighbor that comes forth and has something to say that they witnessed in terms of a scream and also an eyewitness report that they gave to police. Tell us what they said to police in terms of this description and what they heard and when.
Okay, that is such an important point because the neighbor across the street heard after midnight. Or at midnight, a scream of a child, the most heart-wrenching scream she had ever heard in her entire life. This scream came definitely, in her opinion, from across the street, from the Ramsey's home. That tells us that at midnight, JonBenet's still alive because she's the one that screamed.
hallelujah, she actually said something I can agree with, because this neighbor's experience was actually documented in what is known as the Bonita Papers, which were written by one of the Boulder PD's Dream Team investigators, Dan Hoffman's paralegal Benita Sawyer, who chronicled this witness's experience. And I have gone over in my previous episode, Eyewitness Accounts Episode 4, and a shorter video titled The Harrowing Scream of a Child and the Sound of Metal Hitting Concrete. But it was also discussed in the book Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, and perhaps most importantly, in the Paula Woodward book We Have Your Daughter, in which she states, another Ramsey neighbor stated that she had heard one loud, incredible scream. It was the loudest, most terrifying scream she had ever heard. It was obviously from a child and lasted 3 to 5 seconds, at which time it stopped abruptly. She thought the parents would hear the scream. The scream came from across the street south of the Ramsey residence. It happened between midnight and 2 a.m. the morning of December 26, 1996, from BPD reports number 1, 1930, number 1, 174, and number 1, 175. From BPD reports 1, 174, 1, 481, 1, 1548, another neighbor who lived south of the Ramsey house contacted a BPD detective on December 31st because of the scream the first neighbor had heard. The neighbor said she also heard a scream. She was interviewed on February 26, 1997. So now we have 2 confirmed eyewitnesses who heard her scream that evening. But this is where Melinda totally loses me, as she continues by stating,
now, later, that same witness who's hearing the scream and is wondering what's going on across the street, that same witness saw at 5 p.m., okay, now we're into the next day, the day after Christmas.
Right.
huh? Say what?
Where John and Patsy are leaving their home at 5 to go to the Fleet White party. But the neighbor is saying goodbye. She has their dog.
Okay.
She sees a man coming from the left, walking straight to John's house. There's a good chance that the person walking straight to John's house and cutting, as you're looking at the front of the house over to the left corner, watched John and Patsy pull away because of the timing. So this curious woman saw the image of the man, knows that he was, maybe 5'6", maybe 130 pounds, what jacket he was wearing, that he, with intention, walked toward the house and off to the left corner. That would be, by the way, the same corner where if you lift up the grate and slide into the room, it would be that corner. Later, when the police were there to find out about the kidnapping, which, as you know, turned into a murder, he is there running away from the house. That same man is running away from the house, from the back, and then back to the direction he came from. And this woman is watching him run away from the house while the authorities are in the house, probably looking for him. Now they realize this is not a kidnapping, this is a murder. So she had turned around and stopped one of the local officers in front of her home, like in between the 2 streets. And she said, there is a man running away from the house. This is what he looks like, but he is the same man that at 5 o'clock in the evening approached the house and that front left corner. So it's the same man at 5 who is running away now. Maybe someone could go catch up with him and find out who he is and why is he here and why is he running away from the house when the house is loaded with police officers. She said no one paid attention to her. No one pursued that individual.
Incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible indeed. But this is Melinda Kula trying to put the blame on her falsely accused suspect Bill Ramsey, who is really named William Rome, as she also did on the Real Cuff YouTube channel on August the 6th of 2020, which would have been JonBenet's 30th birthday. But we are going to pick up that episode where she is discussing the wine cellar door which JonBenet was found behind. Jumping right into it, she states,
The police had said they tried to open the door and were not able to do so. It's probably because he was holding that door shut because he was still in that room.
Leave me alone! Jill, this is Sergeant Sacker. Listen to me. We've traced the call. It's coming from inside the house. Our squad cars are going over there right now. Just get out of that house. Jill.
Okay, but all joking aside, It was Officer Rick French, in addition to the officer that took this picture, that neglected to check behind this door, which could have helped change the whole outcome of this case. Although we cannot change the past, we can look further into this December 26, 1996 Boulder Police Department field report written by Officer Rick French, explaining why he failed to look behind that door, as he states, "Between time of consulting with the detectives and the family, I walked through the lower level of the house and the garage, looking for obvious evidence. Although somewhat messy due to the season, the residents did not look out of order. In the basement, I attempted to open the door leading to the area where JonBenet was ultimately found, but it was secured by a wooden latch above the door. The door opened inward and I was looking for access out of the house. Since the door could not be used for that purpose and it was latched closed, I did not open it." So much for Melinda's theory of the officer and her supposed suspect, Bill Ramsey, playing tug-of-war with the door. But getting back to the show, she continues.
To confirm that, the neighbor across the street told the police, when we had a missing child, "I saw someone approach John Ramsey's home as they were leaving to go to the party at the Fleet White's house. But I thought that was Burke Ramsey from the first marriage. Common sense is they were supposed to gather together for the Christmas holiday. So she just assumed that's who it was. He walked with determination and directly to John and Patsy's house. This man she witnessed. Her explanation to the police as to what he looked like, her description, fits Bill Ramsey. The police are in the home. The police are looking for a missing child. The police return because now we have a dead child. They're in the home, and this same woman, this same neighbor, witnessed the same man running from behind the house, heading in the direction that he had originally come from. She mentioned that to the authorities as well. They did not chase him down to find out who he was and why was he seen running from the Ramsey home. And oh, by the way, going to the Ramsey home.
So besides her current claim that the perp was hiding behind the door and looked like Burke Ramsey, the story hasn't changed much. But fortunately, the co-host appears to have caught one of her mistakes as they interrupt with,
"I have one question I want to clarify.
Yes.
You said that the next door neighbor saw somebody coming in the evening before, and then right as the police were arriving on the scene out the back door, that looked like the previous marriage son, the first marriage."
Mm-hmm.
But you said the name Burke. Was that Burke that neighbor said, or Andrew?
I'll be very clear on that. Thank you very much for helping me with that. The neighbor assumed that it was Andrew from the prior marriage, the first marriage, because she knew that they were all gathering over the holiday. But she had seen John and Patsy leave and head in the opposite direction that Bill Ramsey was coming from, and the two children, Burke and JonBenet, were in the car with mother and father to go to Fleet White's house for the celebration. The two families were very, very close at that point in time. So as they're leaving, it's almost as though Bill was hiding somewhere and waiting for them to leave so that the entire family didn't see him. Because as they left and they're driving away, that is when the neighbors saw, because she's still looking, saying goodbye. The car's pulling away. She has the dog.
"If you say so, but please continue."
The neighbor saw to the left of her, because they're going to the right, the neighbor saw this man walking with a very definite pace to the Ramsey home and then to the left and back. She saw that man enter the property of the Ramseys. And she said she thought it was Andrew from the prior marriage. It was not Burke. Burke was in the car with mom and dad and JonBenet. So maybe it was Andrew from the first marriage. But what I did is when I heard that, I sent a copy of the police mugshot of Bill Ramsey in Ocean County, New Jersey, that's where it was taken, to the authorities in Boulder, Colorado, and I asked them to please give this woman, the neighbor, a copy, show her. See if this person's face was who she may have seen, if she was able to get a side view of who was approaching. He is 5'6", soaking wet. He's 130 pounds, give or take a pound.
Okay, so Melinda is very adamant that the somebody that this female neighbor supposedly saw is her suspect, Bill Ramsey, the supposed illegitimate son of John Ramsey and a Philippine prostitute, who is actually named William Rome. But I have multiple issues with this claim, because first of all, he is supposed to resemble John Andrew, according to the eyewitness's statement. And according to Melinda, her suspect is supposed to be 5 foot 6 inches tall. Now, I am not a mathematician by any means, but the measurement on the wall behind this man appears to read he is 68 inches tall, which, if my math is correct, would make him 5 feet 8 inches tall. So Melinda cannot even get her own suspect's height right. Nor does he look anything like John Ramsey's eldest son, John Andrew, in my opinion, whose height I honestly don't know. But looking at this picture of him while JonBenet was still alive, he appears to tower over the rest of his family, and I'm pretty sure his father was around the average height of 5'9" or 5'10". But now that we have determined that Melinda is not even sure about her own suspect's height, why Officer French had not checked behind the wine cellar door JonBenet was found behind, what day the White's Christmas party was, and whether the person the supposed eyewitness saw resembled Burke or John Andrew, we will check out one final Melinda Kula appearance from the middle of last December 2022, and her biggest faux pas in relation to the telling of this tale, as Melinda states.
Now let's talk about Bill Ramsey and that house. When John and Patsy were driving away, the neighbor that had the dog, that neighbor who had our little puppy, the puppy's name was Jock. JonBenet's dog was Jock. The neighbor's watching the dog. John and Patsy are leaving. It's 5 o'clock.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
The neighbor did not yet go inside after she's waving, go goodbye, have a nice time, whatever. The neighbor saw a man coming from the opposite direction to the front of John's house and walking straight to the house and to the back left of the house.
To the left, I kick, now walk it by yourself.
The neighbor saw that, but the neighbor thought it was Andrew from the prior marriage, and she just assumed he was joining the family. He just missed them by minutes. So he'll get in the house and he'll just wait for them to return. She thought it was Andrew from the prior marriage. The shape and the build and all of that was similar. Small frame, thin man. After the police are in the house looking for JonBenet, she's a missing child. And they're searching the house. And then they're looking for a dead child. Sometime in that time period, she, who's nosy, as all of us are wanting to know what's going on when there's so many police in front of the house, thinking maybe we can help, maybe we know something, she sees the same man. Police are in the house. She sees the same man running from behind the house back in the direction he came from. It's the same man. So she stopped an officer who was outside, and she said to the officer,
Stop in the name of love before you break my heart. Think it over.
Somebody at 5 o'clock walked directly up to the house and stayed in the house. And when the police are in the house, somebody, that same man, left the house, and that somebody went in the opposite direction, away from the house, the direction they came in the first place. Somebody in law enforcement needs to look at that man, find out who he is. Why was he there? Where is he going? when the police are in the house, that's when he decided to take off and leave from the back of the house.
But now that Melinda has put up her wanted poster, let's see if we can set things straight in her mind. So first of all, the neighbor who was watching the Ramsey's dog Jock was a man named Joe Barnhill, who I'm pretty sure identified as a he and not the she that Melinda keeps misgendering him to be. And she was not the one that heard the scream the night before. That was an actual biological female named Melody Stanton. And Melody Stanton is the neighbor that lived directly across the street from the Ramseys, is the first neighbor who reported hearing the scream that evening, and lived 2 houses to the south of Joe Barnhill, who had the Ramsey's dog Jock and the boarder Glenn Meyer living in his basement. But now that we've gotten that straightened out, there is another big hole in Melinda's story, and it involves Melody Stanton's line of sight into the Ramsey's yard, as it appears rather heavily forested. But if you are not sure, we will turn to this aerial footage, which appears to be from around the time of the crime, as the investigative team's van, the police crime tape, and police cruisers are in the image. And it looks pretty thick through that yard. However, fortunately, I was also able to locate this actual crime scene photo that was taken from roughly the vantage point of Melody Stanton's home and was taken the morning of the suspected kidnapping. So I don't think Melody Stanton would have been able to see all that Melinda Kula is claiming. But I believe there is another major flaw to Melinda Kula's theory regarding the running man that she is not taking into account, as the problem is spelled out in this short news clip.
There are 9 outside doors in the Ramsey home. There are 104 windows, 100 of them open to the outside.
And a number of them are on the south side of the home, as shown in this image of the southeast corner of the house. But looking over to the west side of the home, we see from this crime scene photo from that morning that the windows extend all the way to the corner Melinda referred to earlier, which just behind the grill seen on the right is the infamous window well grate with the broken window. Now going back around the corner and utilizing a clearer and more current image, we see that nearly all of the south side of the home is covered with windows. Even wrapping around at the east side or front of the home, notice the door and corner window as we zoom in, because that window and door are hidden by this wall. But starting in the solarium and scanning through the dining room, there are a lot of windows on that side of the home leading to this dining room set of French doors, which leads directly out to the notorious recessed alcove with the window well that Melinda believes the suspect exited through, before turning the corner towards the front of the house, running past all of these windows with multiple people and police in the home, to run out to the front yard to make their escape, while the police are parked out front of the home, and there are multiple police officers on lookout. But if that does not convince you that Melinda is absolutely cuckoo, I have saved the best for last, and this plot twist should demolish any bit of credibility anyone thinks Melinda should have. Because while Melinda has credited one female witness to having 3 separate eyewitness encounters, 2 visual and 1 audio, the woman who reported hearing the scream between midnight and 2 a.m. that morning, Melody Stanton from directly across the street, is not the one who saw the John Andrew lookalike around 5 p.m. on Christmas Day. That was neighbor 2 houses to the north of her, Joe Barnhill, the one who actually had the Ramsey family's dog Jock, as this is rather well known amongst true Ramsey case followers, and is even documented in Detective Steve Thomas's book, as is shown on this acandyrose.com webpage, and quotes his book stating, "Another reason to interview the Barnhills, however, was that Joe had told the police he had seen JonBenet's older half-brother John Andrew in Boulder on the evening of December 25th. Then Detective Thomas tries to discredit and dismiss this eyewitness account and throw some additional unwarranted shade on John Andrew. But as Sweet Brown says, ain't nobody got time for that. Because we have to go back to the candyrose.com website and their page discussing the Running Man sighting, which properly documents that this was reported on the Boulder News Forum on January 26, 1997 by user JD. That a neighbor of the Ramseys reported seeing a running man leaving the crime scene on December 26, 1996, and the female neighbor said the man was tall and slender. That she had called the Peter Boyle's radio show in Denver to report the sighting, after reporting it to the unresponsive police department, might I add, and that nothing else seems to be known regarding this running man, or even which neighbor it was that supposedly reported this. Yet I believe this to be true because it was also reported in the ABC 2020 special The List, where the late great Detective Lou Smith is recorded saying,
"There was a person seen going across the lawn of the Ramsey house,"
which I do not believe he would be stating if it was not true, unlike just about everything that comes out of Melinda Kula's mouth. And with that, I will hopefully be ending my exposure of Melinda and her lies for a while, at least until she resurfaces again, which I honestly hope she doesn't. Because in the words of rapper Big Sean,
I got a million trillion things I'd rather fucking do than to be fucking with you, little stupid ass.
So let's say goodbye to Melinda for now, and next week we will get into everything wrong with John Wesley Anderson's new book, Lou and JonBenet, which unfortunately there are many mistakes. However, it is not all bad, as the following week we will cover everything right with this book, and one of those things confirms my prior statements, which Mr. Anderson likely would not have done in my opinion if he knew the implications. So make sure to stay tuned, because you won't want to miss these upcoming episodes of JonBenet's Web Truths, brought to you by the One Solved Mystery YouTube channel. Now for the full story on Melinda Kula's shenanigans, click on the playlist on the upper left. And to subscribe and check out my full channel covering the JonBenet Ramsey case, click on the logo on the right. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.